2 more people were killed and 9 injured as a result of last night's Russian attack in the Kyiv region. Among the injured is a girl who is not yet a year old. According to the regional military administration, Russian occupiers killed men in the Bucha and Obukiv districts. The enemy strike did not spare any of the 7 districts in the region. In particular, in the Fastiv district, private houses and an apartment building were destroyed. 2 women were hospitalized and 3 other civilians received medical assistance at the scene. In the other 6 districts of the Kyiv region, more than 30 private homes, 5 apartment buildings, shops, businesses, educational and medical institutions were damaged. Since the beginning of the day, at least 83 people have been injured in Ukraine as a result of Russian strikes. This was reported by Volodymyr Zelenskyy while commenting on the overnight enemy attack.
Putin can't even pronounce the word hurrah properly anymore, he mumbles, yet he still defeats residential buildings with his missiles. 3 Russian missiles targeted a water supply facility, burned down a market, damaged dozens of residential buildings, and several ordinary schools. He launched his Oreshnik against Bila Tserkva. Honestly, they're just not right in the head. It's important that this does not go without consequences for Russia. Today, everyone in the world who does not remain silent, who helps Ukraine, is a defender of life. We need decisions from the United States of America, from Europe, and from others, so that this old Oreshnik in Moscow finally utters the word peace.
Last night, for the 3rd time since the start of the full-scale war, Russian occupiers used a medium-range ballistic missile Oreshnik against Ukraine. The enemy launched it from the Kapustin Yar testing ground in the Astrakhan region. This information was confirmed by our Air Force Command. The ballistic missile fell in the Bila Tserkva district of the Kyiv region. And the main target of the enemy that night was Kyiv. In total, during the massive combined strike, Russian occupiers launched 600 attack drones at Ukraine, 549 of which were neutralized. They used 90 missiles, 55 of which were neutralized. Another 19 missiles likely did not reach their targets. Information about them is being clarified. At present, it is known that 11 out of 30 Iskander ballistic missiles were shot down or suppressed. 44 out of 54 cruise missiles of various types were also neutralized. Last night, Russia also launched 2 Kinjal aeroballistic missiles and 3 Zircon anti-ship missiles. According to preliminary information, 16 missiles and 51 attack drones struck 54 locations. In another 23 places, debris from enemy hardware fell. The Russian strikes were condemned by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. He emphasized that Russia continues to underestimate the courage of Ukrainians and called on the Kremlin to end the war, as such attacks only prolong human suffering and in no way change the fact that Russia is losing this war.
For more than 4 years since the Russian invasion, Russia continues to underestimate the courage, determination and resilience of the Ukrainian people, even as the Putin regime relentlessly bombs Ukraine's energy infrastructure, schools, hospitals and homes. We call on Russia to immediately cease these attacks and put an end to this illegal war of aggression.
Dissatisfaction with Putin's policies is growing in Russia. According to data from VTCOM cited by the Moscow Times, at the end of April, 36% of Russians said they were dissatisfied with domestic policy. This is the highest level since 2021. Among the reasons cited are inflation, taxes, new taxes, internet blockages, the worsening economic situation and war fatigue. And of course, this does not yet mean that the regime is shaking, but it shows that the war is increasingly turning into an economic and social bill for Russians, one that you have to pay whether you want to or not. So we will be discussing all of this with Vitaly Shafran, an economist and a member of the MBU Council in 2019 to 2021. Mr. Vitaly, welcome.
Thank you.
Please tell us, let's start with this main figure. 36% of Russians say they are dissatisfied with domestic policy. Well, for an authoritarian country and a state-run survey, is that a lot or is it not critical at all?
In fact, it is critical. And plus, it's important how the question was asked. Because if you ask them whether they support Putin, many are afraid to answer truthfully. But when they're asked whether they support some other candidate, they're more willing to speak up, and the results are somewhat different. Strangely, these 36% roughly coincide with the current poverty level in Russia. In economics, it's considered that the population lives below the poverty line when they spend more than 35% of their income on food. At the present moment, within the Russian Federation now, on average, Individuals are spending approximately 40% of their total earnings, and roughly 35 to 40% of the entire population spends more than a full third of their monthly income, specifically on essential food items and grocery products. And in some regions, the situation is much worse, especially in remote areas, because according to statistics, their salaries seem high, but food prices are even higher. And so, generally speaking and in principle, the specific figures you mentioned align quite closely with the official economic statistics. So I think they are reasonably precise and fundamentally accurate.
So we can already say that Russians are starting to feel not the greatness of war, but, well, the bill to be paid. And here I have another question. Previously, it was said that in Russia, the refrigerator would never defeat the television. Has anything changed?
You know, they never really had a crisis before. Those months that we observed with you from November 25th to February 26th, when oil prices were within the range of $40 to $45 per barrel, specifically their tax prices, yes, the ones they use to collect taxes for their budget. This hit them very hard, and all this time, since the beginning of the aggression, the regional budgets in Russia's consolidated budget were donors, not deficit ones. Now we see that the deficit of the consolidated budget for last year is significantly larger. We see a large deficit in extra budgetary funds, such as social insurance and the pension fund. We see that due to these deficits, regions have started to cut salaries or delay payments, especially at the beginning of the year. In February, there was a real peak when salaries were delayed for teachers, healthcare workers, and medical staff. And this was quite painful for them. They also found the tax increases very painful, including the increase in personal income tax for the population, as well as rising prices, because the official inflation rate there is half of the real one. And of course, the poorer segments of the population feel it the most. I would say that the acute phase of the crisis for them only began in February. Only now are they trying to address these issues, but the official Ministry of Finance has already announced that they expect a regional budget deficit of 1.9 trillion rubles. This is a huge amount for them because, and as I said, the regions have always run deficits.
Sorry to interrupt. We only have a minute left, but I have to ask. In your opinion, does Russia still have the resources to continue the war for years, even with such economic degradation?
I don't think they have the resources. The elites will keep putting pressure on Putin, yes. But when decisions are made by one person who, as we can see, is not entirely balanced in their decision-making, then it's not financial analysts who should be making predictions, but probably psychoanalysts.
Mr. Vitali, thank you. Thank you for joining us and sharing your insights. And thank you to all our viewers who joined in the fundraiser for the car. We raised more than 20,000. We spoke with Vitaly Shapran about the growing dissatisfaction with Putin's policies. Well, and next, well,